What? Good. We may need an extra copy. Good evening. I'm Peter Gosselin, the Vice Chair of ANC 34G. Bruce, do you have the capacity to get that off the screen? Or Jane, do you? I apologize for the near half an hour delay, and you will see that we don't have a quorum here tonight. I want to, when we get to voting for the agenda, I think we can't even vote for it. I would like to, after we hear from Joel Lawson from the Office of Planning, and we've talked with him and you have asked your questions. Before we end this meeting, I just want to talk with you briefly about meetings in the future. We seem to have hit a limit among many commissioners, and yet still we have 4 meetings in the coming month, 2 special meetings on this very subject, the proposed changes in zoning. So we just need to talk among ourselves about how to work this. In any case, let's start with the few commissioners who are here, introductions, and I just assume this is going to be a hearing. In effect, we don't have a quorum and we're not going to take a vote on anything. We won't even vote on the agenda. Go ahead, Jim. Okay, try another one. Yeah. Bruce, why don't you?
Yeah, in the meantime, I'm Bruce Sherman, single member district 02. Welcome, everybody.
And you also have Peter Lynch, SMD 05. Welcome.
Oh, okay. So Peter's online. Let me see if I can get him. Peter, are you on camera?
Yes, right now.
There you are. How do I move him to get him up here? Well, Peter. What? No, it's booting up. Okay, so
can you yeah, you can hear me. Okay, Jim Nash, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out on this rainy night. I'm Jim Nash, single member district 03.
Okay, and I'm Peter Gosselin, and my district is 06, which is largely the west side of Connecticut back to almost to Friendship Heights. I guess so. We actually have a bare minimum quorum. We'll vote on the adopting the agenda, but it's a very simple agenda. It's basically we're here to discuss the proposed zoning changes. But I would like to just amend the agenda to have just a brief discussion at the end about future meetings. Okay, I understand you're going to have to leave. Okay, but we now have a quorum, so let's vote fast before you disappear. So all in favor of the agenda? Okay, and I take it Peter voted yes. Okay, so let me just tee up the subject. Besides all the other issues that this community is dealing with, potentially the largest one, the one that portends the most change over time, is the proposal by the Office of Planning coming out of the lengthy small area planning process to change the zoning, not just for this site, the community center library site, but to create 2 special zones, one for this site and another for all of the commercial corridor on Upper Connecticut Avenue down to Livingston Street. Okay. And so we have talked about this off and on for much of the last year. It was kind of subsumed in the discussion about the community center library or overwhelmed by that, but it's now live again. In October, the Office of Planning moved the proposal forward to the Zoning Commission. The Zoning Commission set it down for a hearing April 29th. The way in which the Zoning Commission did that has been a matter of some contest, and I don't know quite. We'll probably hear from people here tonight about where that stands. We have, at an administrative meeting last week, agreed to do 2 special meetings in April on this subject. We're going to take testimony from folks here tonight. And then on the 11th, we'll probably take more testimony, but we'll discuss among ourselves what, April 11th, we'll discuss among ourselves what we think we can agree to, if anything, around to say in a resolution about the proposed zoning. And then we have a meeting April 17th. Is that right? April 17th to vote on whatever we agree to or to disagree among ourselves. And so there, in addition to 2 regular meetings, I believe the 8th and the 22nd, we're going to have meetings the 11th and the 17th focused just on this. Now, with that, we're going to do one little additional tech thing. I'm going to try to share my screen. Joel Lawson, the Associate Director of the Office of Planning, is going to walk us through the proposal that OP has moved forward. And I just ask that while he's presenting, let him present. And when it's time for questions, we're going to limit questions. I'll try to keep a time, I think, to 3 minutes is the rule. And please abide by that. So with that, let me see if I can share my screen. And then Joel, you just tell me when I'm supposed to click forward. Now let's get you a machine that works. Okay. All right. I am.
Yes. Yeah, I'll get to that in the end. I was actually hoping to have the presentation up on our website before I came, but we ran into some technical issues. It should be up tomorrow or the day after.
No. All right, folks, if somebody help me here.
While Peter's setting up, I'll just introduce myself and kind of set up. There we go. Sorry, while Peter's setting up, I'll just introduce myself and set the table just a little bit. My name's Joel Lawson. I'm with the DC Office of Planning in our Development Review Division. I'm working on this project along with Maxine Brown Roberts, who is one of our more senior development review planners, one of the few people who's actually been at the office longer than I have. She happens to be on vacation today, so she's not here. So she sends her regrets, but if there are subsequent meetings, she'll be here for that. And you may remember her from some of the past meetings we've had here at the ANC. So I'm here just to give a very short, hopefully, presentation, because I know that people probably have comments and questions. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm sorry if some of it you've heard before, because we've given similar kind of presentations in the past, but I do intend on kind of building on some of the conversations we've had in the past to talk about kind of where we're at right now in the process and kind of what that means for you, what the next steps are. I'll run through it relatively quickly, but certainly if, as I'm going through it, if you have questions, it's up to the chair if he wants to take questions during the presentation, but we can certainly kind of go back to individual slides if you have questions on individual slides after the presentation is complete. And I guess the last comment I'll make is I just want to thank the ANC in particular for scheduling this special meeting for us. It's really helpful for us to have this conversation. Just thank you for your accommodation. So
Let's try this. Bear with me. So this is my screen. Why doesn't it show? Here, how about this?
I will also note, just kind of while we're waiting, that I did bring some handouts, including some background information. Some of them are similar to some of the handouts we brought at the last meeting. I wasn't quite sure where to put them. So they're out in the lobby. So you should feel free to help yourself to those as well.
There are copies?
Sorry, not copies of the presentation, copies of aspects of the zoning and how we kind of got to the place where we are now.
Folks online, we're having trouble sharing the screen. I'll keep working on this, but Joel is going to start talking us through the proposal by OP. Thank you.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, you know, yeah, let's try, give us one more.
Okay.
So here's the problem, Cheryl, right? Here's the document.
You have to go back and do screen share.
Oh, so here we are on screen, right? So we clicked on this. We've tried it already with one screen share, so.
Well, you're probably gonna have better luck with that.
Try that there.
And maybe you wanna go to advanced.
Post only.
There you go.
Close that. Now
Okay.
try the document.
Now it should be loading.
Now, you see, here's the problem, Cheryl. It's not there, which means it's not, people aren't seeing it.
You don't have it set up on your settings.
You get as far as my screen, that's the screen. No, that's looking at the computer, the tech computer that's running this.
Share.
Did that. Twice.
Well, I think if it's a concern, the process concern usually goes to the opposite. Process. That,
Now it's not. Jerry, come up here. Jerry, come on.
Do you know how to do this?
He does.
Hey, Jerry.
Jerry, now it's.
The problem with you just talking is the people online can't see anything. They've at least got some documents here, so let's see if we can. I'm the host.
Yeah.
We
work with the system.
I've clicked share on the Zoom.
Mhm.
Here is the document. When I click share here, this is what I get. What do I do now?
You know what I would do if I were you? I would send it to Peter Lynch. He could do it from his computer more easily than you can through the system.
So Jerry,
Wow.
showing up is him, a picture of Peter.
Right.
So we need to.
Right, well, what I suggested is he sent it to Peter Lynch.
So Peter Lynch, Jerry Mallitz has come up with a workaround. I'm going to send you this document, make you co-host, and ask you to share it and see if it'll go up that way. What do you think of that?
Peter, I wish I could do that. I'm going to be sort of in and out on my computer, so I won't be able to do that, unfortunately.
Going to email this to two people. Yes, and now let's share it. German run together. Just five. At gmail.com. Well, it's not. I'm also sending it there. Yes. I'm sending it to Ron too. More the merrier. Okay, folks. Ron, you want me to send it to you too? No, I'm sending it right now. Okay, it is going to Mallets. Oh, yeah, so we can't, that's it. Okay, I just sent it to you. Now. Right. There you go. Okay. I'm making, let's make loads of people. Ron, you're now a co-host. Jerry. You got the file? Okay, let me just, I haven't made you a co-host. Okay, both of you are co-hosts now.
Hi, guys.
Who gets the credit for pulling it up? Okay, then you're controlling it. All right. All right. So Joel, you're going to be letting Bruce is going to run this. Can you get rid of that? It's not on my screen. Yes, you got it. You got it. Good. Tremendous. Okay, we're going to try this all over. It's only taken us 45 minutes to get started. Joel, have at it. Joel Lawson is the Associate Director of Office of Planning for Technical.
Oh, I'm not technical anything. I deal with zoning issues mostly.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have the floor.
Once again, thanks everybody. You can go forward a couple of slides. Yeah, so this is just, I'm going to go through this really quickly because I know people have questions. This is to remind people of, kind of the exact area that we're looking at. We're not proposing any changes to the zoning in the low density residential areas. This is focused on the Connecticut Avenue corridor, in particular, the Civic Site. Next slide. There's certainly been a lot of questions about the process, and so I wanted to kind of start out with that. I'll be coming back actually to this slide at the very end to kind of talk about what some of the next steps are. But in terms of what has happened, the process actually kicked off about 3 years ago when council approved the comprehensive plan for the district and established the policy and the policy framework for bringing this forward. After that, as you all remember, there was a small area planning process that was also led by a different division of the Office of Planning. That was approved by council in 2022. And we pretty much immediately started to think about what new zoning would look like to effectuate those policy documents. We had a number of meetings with the ANC subcommittee, and then we've been to the ANC 3 times up until now. And that led to us drafting and filing what's called our Setdown Report, which is our initial report to the Zoning Commission. That was filed in October, and it went to a Zoning Commission public meeting in November. Yes, it was, as far as I know. Well, I think there were a couple of surveys that were done, but I think it was before the ANC survey, right? I think so. So the Setdown Report obviously recommended that the Zoning Commission move forward with this application, and that's what they did. They voted to move forward with it. The report that we drafted is currently available on the Office of Zoning website. Everything related to this case, everything that's being filed to this case is available on the Office of Zoning website. We're kind of updating our OP website right now, and so some of this information should be up on the OP website really soon as well. But for now, it's already available on the Office of Zoning website. So once it's set down, what happens after that is that we start to refine the proposal, take additional looks at it, and come back out to the community, which is kind of part of what we're doing right now. So we can go to the next slide. I'm probably just going to skip over this one because I kind of went over this, kind of talking about how the planning process of the comp plan led to the small area plan, and those lead to the zoning, which is really kind of the implementation part of those two broader planning processes that are already complete. Next slide. The comprehensive plan, there's a couple of slides on this because it's just critical to what we're doing. And it really sets the boundaries for what we can propose in zoning, because the Zoning Commission cannot approve zoning that they consider inconsistent with the policy direction of the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan is a massive document. It's about 1,000 pages long, a little bit more than that, lots of diagrams. And there's a lot of policy statements in there. And so our report goes through those policy statements, but it also addresses the 2 maps, which are critical, the future land use map and the generalized policy map. Neither one of these is a specific map like zoning is. It doesn't kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of a property by property basis, but it does set the tone for a general area. And the big change that happened in 2021 was that council changed the future land use map designation from low density commercial to a mix of low density commercial and moderate density residential, with the local public facility stripe also on the Civic Core site. Next slide.
Just before we leave that slide, could you just explain to me what the dotted red line on the generalized policy map, because that
yes.
wanders into a lot of residential areas.
That is a great question. That's a really generalized line. And that was established, that was put in the plan by council to establish areas that needed future planning study before changes recommended on the policy map and in the written policies of the plans could be effectuated. So that red line that you see on the map on your left is really what triggered the small area plan. So the small area plan achieved what was called for by it being included within a future planning analysis area. At this point, it's no longer future planning because that planning has been done through the small area plan. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. local public facility. Yes.
So
Yeah,
someone
it
in
does.
the audience is asking about a sort of seeming mismatch between the tan area in the map on the left and the shape of the pink and striped area on the right. There doesn't seem to be a bump out. Can I just interrupt 1 second? Some people in the chat are saying they can't hear. The question is it just Corinthia Simmons or are others?
No, whoever asks a question has to go to the mic, because if you're sitting down, no one can hear online. So if you want to ask a question, just come up to the mic and ask the question.
If you have problems hearing, other than the speaker in the audience who was asking a question, you didn't hear at all, but if you're having trouble hearing me, would you just raise your hand so I can see whether there are a lot of people or none?
But Brian, if you wanted to reiterate the question at the mic so people can hear online, that'd be great. Thanks.
We can hear you fine online, Peter. I just want to add that we were involved in the SAP through the whole process. We've never seen that red line, which interesting choice to use redlining, but also that goes right through our house, and we've never seen it before. So it's just kind of shocking. Thank you.
But Joel, if you don't mind repeating his question.
I'll try.
Yeah.
I think the question, I think I heard a couple of questions. I think there was one question about what that red dotted line means. That is an excerpt from the 2021 comprehensive plan. So that is part of what council approved as part of the comprehensive plan. And that there are areas like this kind of throughout the district where council said before, like I said, before we effectuate or implement some of the land use direction that's proposed in the comprehensive plan, some additional planning study is needed. So this red line here actually goes all the way down Connecticut Avenue. So it also captures Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, which went through a separate planning process and will go through its own separate zoning process at some point. So that's what spurred on the Chevy Chase small area plan, that red line right there. The map on the right is the future land use map, which was, as I said, was also updated in the 2021 plan. The main change was to add the moderate density residential stripe over the corridor, as well as over the Civic Core site. So the Civic Core site has 3 stripes, moderate density residential, low density commercial, and civic and local public facilities. The rest of the corridor has 2 stripes, the moderate density residential and the low density commercial. Sure. That was part of the 2021 comprehensive plan. Well, I'm not saying it. It does. Yeah, and I understand that. The colors are really close, and it's really hard to distinguish them. When you see the paper copy, it might be a little bit clearer. But yes, this was adopted as part of the 2021 comprehensive plan. Both maps were.
And Joel, just one quick second. I think Mary Rouse had a question. Mary, do you just want to ask the question of Joel?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Joel, on previous maps, they talked about RF zones, one on the Safeway lot, one on the PNC Bank lot, and one on the CVS lot. Where are those zones today? Have you abandoned the idea on those?
No, we haven't got to the zoning map yet. These are maps from the comprehensive plan. Later on in the presentation, we'll be getting to the zoning, the proposed zoning map. But no, we've not abandoned that idea.
No such luck. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Keep going, Joe.
Yep, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, I'm fine either way. It's up to.
Yeah,
to
we can take, this whole meeting is dedicated to this, so we can take the questions as they come up so people won't forget them. They'll be in context then. So if you have questions, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
Yep. So just a little summary of the Chevy Chase small area plan. Like I said, the comprehensive plan sets the real policy direction. The small area plan provided additional guidelines for how to kind of nuance the zoning as it would be applied along this specific corridor. So that was started in 2021, early 2021, and was eventually approved by council in July of 2022. It certainly emphasizes the new housing opportunities along this corridor to further civic policy, city policy. And it also established a number of mostly design and some use related guidelines for new buildings, both for the corridor and for the civic site. It also includes a number of guidelines that are not zoning related, a number of guidelines related to public space. Kind of an odd thing about zoning in the district is that zoning ends basically at the property line. So public space, the street, the sidewalk, that kind of thing is not governed by zoning and instead is governed by the Public Space Committee, which is administered by DDOT.
And Joel, can I ask a question that I foreshadowed on Monday night that I would ask you regarding design principles that are built into the small area plan and how those eventually get incorporated into some mechanism somewhere, if not zoning otherwise?
Well, in terms of zoning, it's relatively straightforward because I shouldn't say it's straightforward because it's pretty nuanced stuff. And we tried to, like I said, incorporate them into the zoning as requirements. So we'll get to this a little bit further on, but there are requirements for example, ground floor retail that wouldn't exist in a regular zone. There's requirements related to glazing and setbacks and transitioning, none of which would exist in a straightforward mixed-use zone, but would exist in the zoning that would be applied in Chevy Chase under our proposal. Other aspects of the guidelines for public space are addressed through, like I said, through DDOT more than OP, as they're doing streetscape improvements or as somebody does private development that faces onto that public space, in which case DDOT has some leeway in terms of talking to the developer to make sure that whatever improvements or changes they make to the public space are consistent with those guidelines.
So this has come up in conversation that we've had in the last 24 hours. And I think, Ron, you responded to the notion that a building permit would contain some of these notions that are expressed in the small area plan regarding design principles, characteristics. The layperson reading the small area plan sees a number of principles and ideas that are expressed to make the development attractive for the community, to respond to the criteria of the community, what people have expressed through their participation in the development of the small area plan that they wanted to see. But zoning only goes so far, as you've clearly laid out. A building permit, as I understand it, only goes so far. So the question gets back to how much of building out the small area plan and the development along the corridor will be left to individual developers?
Typically, and it can vary because I honestly don't know what DDOT's budget is, whether they've got a budget for making specific streetscape improvements for this particular corridor. But typically it becomes a kind of a coordination thing between individual developers and DDOT, and the community to make sure that those kinds of guidelines are addressed through whatever development comes along, whether it's redevelopment of the public space itself or redevelopment of private space that faces onto that public space.
Right. So just to follow on, to try to be as clear as possible for people who may be interested in this.
Wait, just a minute, Bruce.
Yeah. But Cheryl, hold on, because I'm,
Well, I
I'm
mean,
midstream
you-
asking a
Yeah,
question. So
you
just
really-
hang on a second.
Yeah, that's, could we wait until, so you ask your question, but then let's get the presentation done and then we'll do questions. And I think when we do questions from the audience, I'm going to give you my microphone because that one seems to be dead. So, but the people in the audience, the people online need you to have a mic.
So I was suggesting, Peter, that because these slides, he's got quite a few, and we're going to go through a lot of this, and 6 slides down, we will have forgotten what the context was for a question. We can go light on these, but one just final thing, Joel, that I want to try to be clear on. Once the zoning, if the zoning is approved, the zoning amendments are approved, then it is by right development for developers.
That's correct.
Right, which means that the ANC doesn't have any say in what will be built particularly, or maybe I could be educated on what leeway there might be for the ANC to weigh in, which also means the community doesn't really have any say either. So what's expressed in the small area plan, the provisions laid out, the design principles there, the people have read and understood, the question kind of comes back to, how does the community have any assurance that they'll be implemented? If zoning doesn't take care of it, a building permit only goes so far. There's a lot of good language in there on what this might look like, but what role do we play after this is all said and done if it's by right?
I guess I'm not quite understanding the question, because what we're saying is that we're going to incorporate the private development related guidelines as much as we can into the zoning itself. So that becomes part of the development. That becomes a requirement of what you can do. A developer who doesn't want to do it would have to go through a process of going to the BZA or the zoning commission to request relief from doing it, in which case the ANC as well as OP and other agencies would get a chance to comment.
But just to follow up on Bruce's point, during the small area planning process, and particularly towards the end, there was a lot of talk about compatible designs, compatible materials, and so on and so forth. And I think you have told this community again and again and again, hey, wait a minute, that is not appropriate to zoning. And I think the question Bruce is asking is then where does it get appropriate? Or does it turn out that while we had encouraging pictures painted for us about how, whether there be compatible material and so on and so forth, that it turns out there is no way to enforce that. So the jig's up for us.
Well, I wouldn't exactly say that the jig's up. But yeah, I think there are some things that are very difficult to incorporate into, any regulatory process, whether it's zoning or anything that you want to have as being a requirement. Trying to regulate materials is something that we don't do anywhere in our zoning regulations. And we've consistently felt that it's an inappropriate thing for zoning regulations to even try to regulate. I guess I'm giving you what Office of Planning's opinion is, what our proposal is. You as the ANC or members of the community would certainly have the option of saying to the zoning commission, this is incomplete. We think this needs to be incorporated into zoning somehow. I honestly don't know how it could be. And I'd love to have a separate conversation about that. Because I honestly can't envision how that could be done as a regulation.
Right.
Given that Commissioner Sherman has invited this ongoing commentary, Cheryl, why don't you speak? And actually, no, let me bring this out to you, and then we're just gonna heap shuttle.
And I think, Joel, while he's doing that, this is an important thing for us to consider, because it's, again, on the small area plan, it's page 44 in the design section of that, where there are various
I think it's on now.
right. There are various avenues for the community to be able to incorporate these design principles into the build out of the avenue. That's, we can follow up on that. Okay.
My question about the slide, thank you. Cheryl Barnes, Chevy Chase Voice. I've been looking at this, a slide for, I've lost track of how many months, 6 months, 8 months, whatever. To my eye, the scale looks off. Is this created with the ArcGIS system? Is it actually to scale? Are we really looking at houses that exist presently on the right-hand bottom side of that slide and a proposed potential building on the left-hand side of that? Is this to scale?
As far as I know, I took these two drawings directly from the small area plan. And so I wasn't involved in creating the drawings for the small area plan. They appear to be more or less to scale to me. I will say that the bottom drawing obviously shows a 2-story house, which is typical in many parts of Chevy Chase. The upper one shows a 3-story house, which is probably less typical, but certainly permitted under existing zoning.
Okay, thank you.
And Mary Rouse had a question online. Mary, go ahead.
Hi, I would like to make a point that nobody has brought this up, but a historic district, which this community has been discussing since the fall of 2021. A historic district is the only way people in this community can weigh in on matter of right development. It's the only way the ANC can. It's the only way the ANC can represent constituents. It's the only way residents here can do that. And it would be helpful if the Office of Planning would acknowledge that and indicate that that is a very valuable contribution that a historic district does. So I don't think it's fair to say that there is no input. Historic districts also have design guidelines, and the Historic Preservation Review Board and the design review process is what enables people to have a seat at the table and to get involved in matter of right development, which is what these 2 new zones are focusing on.
Okay, can I suggest that we keep moving? Do we have?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, go ahead. And Andrea, we'll come back to you if you could remember your question.
So this is just a bit of a summary of what's in our Setdown report. It's a kind of a lengthy document. There's a lot in it. We obviously describe the area. We describe what our proposal is. We spend a fair amount of time talking about, once again, the comprehensive plan. An important part of our reports now is the racial equity analysis. And that analysis is done through a tool that the Zoning Commission itself developed called their racial equity tool. So our racial equity analysis is kind of structured to address what the Zoning Commission wants us to address. So I don't know how many people have seen our Setdown report. It is available once again on the Office of Zoning website. So the racial equity analysis includes a number of different factors. It touches on neighborhood history. It touches on demographic trends over time, how the demographics have changed, and whether this proposal might positively or negatively, or just how it might change at all. And certainly a big part of it is meeting the citywide needs for additional housing, and particularly additional affordable housing. Our report includes a number of tables. This is just one of them. This one shows the current affordable housing production based on targets. Right now, Rock Creek West is kind of lagging a little bit from all of the other planning areas. And so that becomes part of the analysis that the Zoning Commission will do. It also talks about the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan, of course, and how the guidelines have or have not been incorporated into the zoning. It talks about other city documents like the Rock Creek West Roadmap and the Comeback Plan. That's all in there. And of course, at the very end, we saved the best for last, the draft zoning text amendments, as well as the draft zoning map amendments. So that's all in the report.
And let me just see if there are a couple people online. I guess we're going to intersperse this. So, Andrea, you had your hand up.
That's okay. I don't have a question now. Thank you.
Okay. And Corinthia Simmons?
I don't have a question. There were tech issues from earlier.
Okay, that's not a question. Okay. We'll plow on. Well, and here, let's compare. Hold it.
Joel, my question has to do with the specific zoning proposal that you are talking about is for the Civic Core sites, as I understand, the parcels, right?
That's part of it, yes.
So my question to you and OP would be, in looking at the small area plan, where all of the property owners along this Livingston to the Circle corridor will have the right to build higher density housing, why would we be talking about disposing of a portion of the Civic Core when it will benefit all of the properties adjacent here too, in a way that we can never recover? So how did that enter into your thinking is what, and I, related to that, I have a question that's kind of something that Peter Gosselin has asked, but it really has to do with who's looking at the bigger questions when, for example, the Department of Parks and Recreation said that the Chevy Chase Community Centers was the 5th most actively used site across the city for the 3 years pre-COVID. It had the 5th largest number of reservations and uses. So that report came out at the end of 2023, but who's looking at that kind of data to say whether or not something is surplus?
Well, that actually isn't the role of zoning. Zoning is to implement the policies. That's not the role of zoning. The role of zoning, which is what I'm here to talk about, and I honestly can't talk to those questions because that's not me. And I don't want to give you wrong answers. So the role of zoning is to look at what the policy objectives are in the documents that we use, that council has established, and provide the opportunity for those policies to be effectued. We have to remember, zoning doesn't create anything. You know, we can create any zoning we want, but that doesn't mean that anything is ever going to get built. So we have to look at the policy, what makes sense in terms of zoning to achieve that policy, and then private developers, different city agencies, the people who do these kinds of things will decide whether or not it's a good idea to actually move forward and do that. I think the people that you want to talk to are probably DEMPED. I think that's who you need to talk to about this.
Wait.
No, I said I was not part of that.
You really got to work on this. The folks online don't know who that, whether there was a colloquy there or not. So come to the mic next time, right? Yeah.
Okay, Amy, go ahead.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'd just like to point out that I think that these numbers about Ward 3 are not factually accurate. They don't include affordable housing or IZ units that are currently under construction. They also don't include rent-controlled units at 60% AMI for a family. And they also don't include vouchers by the government's own acknowledgement and as reported in the Washington Post.
No, I think that's probably true. This chart, which comes from the DEMPED website, charts actual dedicated affordable housing, as opposed to vouchers, as opposed to rent-controlled units, which have no protections. These are these are dedicated affordable unit production. And the same criteria is used in all the planning areas. So you can see that it's a relatively small number for Rock Creek West and a small number
Well,
for some other planning areas. But it's using exactly the same criteria as is used for
but
the
sir,
numbers
we
for
have a
all of the
very
other planning
overwhelming
areas.
number of rent controlled apartments, like the second most in the whole district. So it kind of disproportionately prejudices us in the original count.
Okay, and so I think that it is a fair question whether the city, but not to Joel, it's a fair question whether the city, in addition to counting the way is portrayed here.
Well, okay, but it was
has-
on Joel's
ha-
slide, so I'm asking him about a slide.
Amy, just a second. Wait, just hold 1 second. It is a fair question whether the city actually counts voucher occupied apartments, naturally occurring affordable housing, and Joel, if you have any idea who one would ask in the city about that, I think that answer would be useful. But
well, I suspect that there are agencies like DHCD who do count those numbers. What we're talking about here again is dedicated affordable housing, which is not voucher housing, which is not some of the other types of housing that you're talking about. So this is affordable housing that we're talking about.
Would that include IZ housing?
Yes, it would.
Okay, then you're not counting what's under construction out in Friendship Heights area, which is also Ward 3. Because it's still under construction, and I think that you guys are only counting finished. I'm just saying that these numbers are kind of, I don't think that they're as straightforward as they could be.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Are you saying that Ward 3 has too much affordable housing?
No, well, actually, Ward 3 has there are across DC 7% vacancy rate, and 4,000 federally funded vouchers were returned during FY 2023 for not being used. So I think that is an excellent place to start, especially with a $1.2 billion budget shortfall, and with people needing affordable housing right now and not to have to wait for 2 or 3 years while this is built.
I can hold my question till later if you like. I was going to make a point, but I can see that you can't wait.
I don't know who the you is. Is that me? Amy?
Amy, it's Liz Nagy. I wanted to make a point, but there's a lady in the audience who's.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Then I guess I yield. Thank you.
okay, Amy, let's go. Let's see. Andrea, your hand is still up. Is this different from the last? Is this different from the last time?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Does that mean I'm called on?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just gonna go back for a minute to the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan guidelines for things like design and materials. I think some reference was made to the developers needing to adhere to those elements of the small area plan. But as I understand it, the small area plan is not law because it was not part of the comprehensive plan when the comprehensive plan was passed by the council. And also the language in the small area plan, with maybe one exception or two, uses the verb should rather than shall. So it leaves leeway to abide by what's in the small area plan or not. So along those lines, given that I don't really see that the small area plan has much control over what kinds of proposals come in, I'm wondering, given that this community was part of our RFP process, I believe we were told that we would have presentations by the contenders for to receive the contract with the city, and that we would be able to weigh in probably meaninglessly, but still, we'd be able to weigh in on the various proposals. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. But I mean, it's not a zoning issue. It's I mean, the RFP process is in DemPed's domain, and they're going to they're going to have the developers who they have vetted, who make proposals and whose proposals they think are plausible, present to the community. I mean, I don't know. I mean, and indeed, the potential bidders are already talking to the community. There was that billboard that was set up on the other side of the Connecticut Avenue, asking people to take yet another survey. So, I mean, I think we're going to hear from the developers. Let's go to now, Corinthia. We seem to have a lot of. Now, is this you have something to say at this time?
Yes, I do. So
Okay.
I'm just going to say that I'm a little frustrated that Peter Lynch does not represent people who live in apartments a little more. I wish the community would please stop saying that rent control buildings are affordable housing. They are not. Rent control buildings charge market rate rent. Rent control buildings raise rent every year up to a certain threshold. So if the city makes rent control limit 9%, the buildings can increase rent up to 9% versus living in a Bazzuto building where they can raise your rent up to 20%. I've lived in a rent control building. My rent has went up 6% every year for 4 years. I have had my rent increase 24%. So please stop saying that rent control buildings are affordable housing. They are not. And Peter, please speak up for people in the apartments. Our rent continuously go up. We can't refinance to a lower rate. Rent control buildings are not affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll go back to zoning. Go ahead, Joel.
So throughout this process, we've really appreciated a lot of the comments that we've received, certainly in conversations with the ANC and with the community. The racial equity tool, one of the questions that it asks every applicant to address is about those conversations and how those conversations have affected what's actually coming forward before the Zoning Commission. So our report talks about that as well a little bit. This slide provides just kind of a very simple listing of some of the changes we've made to the zoning so far. Of course, it's not cast in stone yet. Additional changes are certainly possible to the zoning as it continues to go through the process, either at the request of the community or at the request of the Zoning Commission itself. But actually, I've gone through that part. So actually, that's good. I think it's good.
Can I ask you a question? So if you can, so what you're saying is, for example, under the NMU4 category, you can encourage existing facade retention, but you can't include, for example, the use of masonry or building material on anything new. Is that right?
If you want, we can go into kind of some of the detail on that now. I think the problem is how you do it and how you do it in a way that's actually administratable. What do you mean by masonry? Does that mean, brick? Does that mean concrete block? Does that mean fake brick? Does that mean red brick? Does that mean beige brick? Does that mean vertical brick? Does that mean brick in a pattern? There's an endless set of permutations once you start to talk about choosing one material over another in a way that it can actually be administered by an agency like the Department of Buildings. Now, where these guidelines might come into play at some point, ones regarding materials, Ms. Rouse is correct that if this does become a historic district, they have the ability to deal more with materials than certainly zoning does. And the other way would be if there is anybody who comes forward with a discretionary development proposal. We wouldn't expect it, but if somebody came forward with something that required BZA approval or zoning commission approval for some reason, then those guidelines could be applied, as part of that review process. So this is a map. Oh, sorry.
Hold on, do you want to ask a question, Jerry?
This is more of a technical question. So the current zoning for here is 40 feet. When you measure this building from Connecticut Avenue, the height of this building is 56 feet. Is the elevation that you're talking about to be measured from Connecticut Avenue? Because everything in the small area plan and the RFP and everything else talks about entrances off of Connecticut Avenue. So does this lot have to be leveled to meet that 65 feet, or are you measuring from the top of this hill? This hill, the crest of this hill is 16 feet higher than the elevation at the end on Connecticut Avenue. So that makes this building 56 feet high. So more than the 40 feet. So is the proposed zoning, the footage, measured from Connecticut Avenue or from wherever the building is built? And if the hill remains, does that mean from the crest of the hill?
Yeah, you've caught me on one here because I honestly can't remember. Typically, height is measured from the front of the building, and a developer is able to choose what that front is. I know that we had, I should know this, and I wish I brought a copy of the regulations with me. We had talked about establishing where height would be measured from on this site. I honestly can't remember if that's in the proposal that we took forward to the zoning commission or not. But I'll make a note and check on that because we know that that's a pretty critical issue.
Okay. So you can follow up with us on
yes,
that.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
To add to Jerry's question, I mean, I have the 16-page summary of your proposal, or 20-page summary that I think is on the zoning commission's website. What's that called? Whatever you talk about? The measuring point. Is there some technical name for that?
There is. It's the building height measuring point.
All right. I mean, if it's here, I will see whether.
Building height measuring point. So you'll often even see on drawings, a little dot on the drawing saying BHMP, and that's what that stands for.
Okay. All right. Well,
Go ahead, Joel. I think we're the next slide up.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Well, no, typically height is measured at the property line. In some zones, it's actually measured from the curb. It varies a little bit in some areas. And like I said, I honestly just don't remember how it would be done on this site. And I'll check on that and I'll get back to people.
You'll have to come up to the mic though, Liz. We can't hear you otherwise, right? So come on up. Well, just hang on, Liz. We can't hear you. Just wait. Just
Kicked out by this lady. Right. Thank you. So it's great that you're going to get back to us, but how will that be? How will we hear?
How would you like to hear?
how about I propose that you write to me tomorrow, and
And then-
I put it on the
You're going to put it on
listserv and elsewhere.
the ANC website,
Oh, sure, I'll
please,
put it
because not
there too,
everyone
but we
is
can-
not everyone is on the listserv. Not everyone is on the Chevy Chase listserv.
Oh, so I'll put it on all the social media.
Thank you so much. I
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Can I leave this here? Is it? Yeah. How about that?
Since we're now talking about where are we measuring from, I notice in the proposed zoning summary, and I know this has been the plan, you say under front setback must be built to front lot line. Okay. I understand this is now the orthodoxy among urban planners, bring it up to the street. In the small area planning process, the one, and I do mean one, area where you all did seem to listen to the community a bit was with regard to people wanting to keep the green space, the trees. This was very important to people. In the ANC survey, with 2,300 respondents from our ANC area, more than any other outreach by a huge magnitude, 70% said they wanted to keep the existing green space. People value this as a bit of a park, and it's nice for the summer camps for the kids, the play groups that are here. It's our community space. If you look at where the green space is and where the trees are, including some heritage trees, where are they? They're in the front and the middle. So when you pull this out to the street, you're going to be destroying the mature trees that give us shade, that give us a sense of the greenery of this space, that make it not just like yet another urban spot where you have, you know, a door on the right next to a building right next to the sidewalk. That is what makes this most attractive. That is more, having it be green is better than a building right next to the sidewalk. If you look at how the library is sited now, as you walk north on Connecticut, it just opens up right in front of you. It is perfectly sited.
Okay.
Okay, so
No, it's a great point, and I'm happy to take that one back. That's actually really good feedback. Certainly, it would not, even if the requirement was there, it would not require the removal of heritage trees. The heritage trees would trump, the setback requirement. But I'm happy to go back and take another look at that and see if it needs some adjustment. Part of that, though, came from desire from people to make sure that the buildings were moved relatively forward so that there was more green space in the back. So that's what would have to be.
yeah, it's just the green space in the back is hidden. This way it is along the street, much more appealing.
Yeah.
And again, this is a community of families with kids. You want the green space. And secondly, if you move it to the back, well, then you're starting from zero. What's it going to be? An urban plaza like what you have in Friendship Heights? I mean, it won't be anything green. The green comes from large existing trees.
I
You can't
understand.
start from zero.
Yeah, no, I understand. No, you're raising a very good point. Thank you. I think some of that green space is also, by the way, in public space, which means that it wouldn't be affected by the development. In other words, some of the green space is part of the road right of way. So you can't build out onto the road right of way. So it would be protected that way as well.
Well, so it builds to front lot line.
Yeah, the lot line is not at the sidewalk. It's back from the sidewalk. Okay, Robert?
I don't know if you've finished your presentation.
Nope.
But a couple of questions.
Sure.
My family owns a couple of businesses right here on Connecticut Avenue. One of them is within 200 feet of this center. Do we have any special interest in speaking with the zoning commission or testifying before the zoning commission?
I'm not sure what you mean by special interest, but certainly typically people who live close to or adjacent to or certainly within an area that's proposed to change, the zoning commission is most interested in hearing their comments and concerns.
Is there such a thing as an interested party nomenclature or
but you're
special designation?
But Robert, you're an interested party, not just because you're near this site. The property your business is in is also slated for rezoning.
It's both. We have
Yeah.
two businesses.
And both
One
are
of them-
slated for
both of them are slated.
Both locations are slated
So
for zoning.
for both things. So
Mhm.
in this, what is it, April zoning commission?
April 29th.
So we are permitted to testify before
Yes.
that. Is there a capacity, an extra capacity for people who were directly affected. Will the zoning commission listen more carefully to what we have to say?
Well, the zoning commission always listens carefully. I would suggest that you watch a zoning commission hearing to see how they operate, because hopefully that will help. But yes, everybody is allowed to testify, and once you testify and say that you're not only close to the civic site but own property within the area, that will obviously carry a lot of weight with the zoning commission.
Are you not obligated to provide notification about the zoning commission hearing to people who are occupying these buildings? Because I haven't received any.
It's possible you haven't. That's handled by actually the Office of Zoning. Notifications go out from the Office of Zoning. I don't know if they've gone out.
Is it possible for you to urge the Office of Zoning to?
I can certainly ask them about that.
Okay. So one final question, and this has to do with a covenant on this piece of property. It's a no apartment covenant. It sits on the back port, 40% of this lot, plus other lots in this neighborhood covered specifically by these zoning changes. It seems to me that until that's resolved, and I know that Council Member Fruman is trying to resolve them through law, how do you propose to move forward?
Well, there are covenants all over the city, and there's zoning all over the city. There's no reason why zoning should be held off for the covenant, for resolution of that covenant, whether it stays or goes. You know, the zoning is the same. The zoning is what the zoning will be. If there are covenants on a property, and again, this happens all over the city, WMATA's got covenants, DC Water's got covenants and easements. It happens all over the place. DDOT has covenants over some properties. It doesn't impact zoning, whether there is or is not a covenant on the property. It certainly can affect how much of that zoning can be built, how much of that zoning could be achieved, but it doesn't affect the zoning itself.
So this is my very final piece of this. If it turns out that the no apartment covenant is not overthrown, you can still raise the zoning, but people can't put apartments there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
There's Cheryl.
It's germane to what Robert was asking. How's that? Cheryl Barnes, Chevy Chase Voice. So the set down is a rulemaking set down.
Yes.
So that limits dramatically, in fact, completely, for the most part, who can speak at a hearing. And
no, it does not.
In this case,
It does not. Like, I mean,
at
that's
all.
just inaccurate.
So people with standing can come and contest what zoning is doing.
Yes, you're
At
allowed to
just
testify.
in the
You're allowed
exact
to
same way.
testify.
Then
Yes.
why is it the case at 17th and U, when that was also set down as a rulemaking case, that it had to be changed to a contested case, just as this zone will have to be changed to a contested case so that people with standing can actually contest it? They were not able to contest it in that situation, and it's exactly like this situation. There's no difference. It's a single owner of a property. This is a single owner of a property with a special zone. It can't be rulemaking. It has to be contested because of that reason. Okay, that's number one.
Could I just for my own education,
Sure.
understand what is this about?
The set down.
Yeah,
No, it's not about the set down. It's about how the public hearing would be administered
It was
by
set
the
down as
Office
a
of Zoning.
rulemaking
And it-
case
and
rather
So
than
the
contested.
zoning commission set this case down as a rulemaking case as the regulations state they should. I think there are some
Is there
people who
any
feel that it should
limitation in
be.
who can, why are you arguing that there's a limitation on who can testify?
I'm sorry, I didn't
And
catch.
Cheryl, you're arguing that there's a limitation on who can testify at this?
And how long they can testify.
There is not a limit on who can testify.
The reason that it was changed at 17th and U is because there was a limit and it was
That's not
changed
correct.
to a
Okay, that's
contested
not
hearing.
correct.
All right. Well, so-
Okay,
I'm
well,
sorry,
we're
Ms.
both
Barnes,
on
but that's not
record.
correct.
But
It's okay, we're both on record.
Yeah, it was changed with U Street because the regulations, it was determined that the regulations established that should have been considered a contested case.
What is the
If
difference?
if the commission decides that this should be, if they change their minds
Mm.
and decide that this should be a contested case, then it would be a contested case. But the rules are different from what I understand. This is Office of Zoning stuff and Zoning Commission stuff again,
Right.
OZLD stuff, but it's my understanding that the rules actually are different here compared to U Street. So it'll be in the end, it'll be the Zoning Commission's determination.
So let me.
But everybody is invited to testify.
Okay.
Everybody is invited to state their piece. You can submit as much to the written record as you want. You can submit 1,000 pages to the written record.
In-person testimony.
Which if you wish to, and you can come in person and testify. Every single person can.
This seems like rather than have people can, so people cannot. I mean, along with getting Liz, the
Robert's
the
question.
measuring point, let me call zoning and ask them, can everybody testify? I mean, and if there's some sophisticated way you want me to ask that question, send me a
I
note.
will.
All right, fine.
There are 2 complaints with the DC Office of Open Government because this was set down as rulemaking instead of contested.
Okay.
And also that rules were waived when they had no right to be waived by the zoning commission
Okay.
because of notification issues.
All right. Why don't you go on to your other, you said you had another question?
I can't remember what it was.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think Andrea Rosen also has a question. Go ahead though, Jerry, then we'll go to Andrea.
Mine will be quick. In the Civic Core RFP, it mentioned to prospective bidders that they should assume certain zoning was going to be in place for them to, for their proposal. The RFP has now been delayed for 2 months for responses. Was one of the reasons that it was delayed to allow for this April 29th hearing to take place before the proposals were due?
I honestly don't know. I don't know why DEMP had. I honestly didn't know that they had delayed it. So,
Yeah,
so
2 months.
I don't know.
So I thought that might have been one of the reasons. You don't know. Thank you.
Sorry.
Andrea, do you want to ask your question?
Sorry, it was in connection with what Cheryl was talking about, so I withdraw.
Okay, good. Should we just see if we could just get over
Speed
the
it
finish
up.
line?
Okay. I think we've actually covered a bunch of this. So unless somebody has a question, I can probably skip over this slide altogether. I did have some images here of the corridor. One of them is a site section. This is through the CC1 zone, which is the commercial corridor, not the civic site. So this kind of shows what kind of a building form could be built under the zoning we're proposing. I also included a couple of images from the small area plan because they do reflect in the end basically what the zoning would allow. The last image I kind of threw in, I just kind of today did a little bit of looking around for images, so there's not a lot here. But this is an image from Capitol Hill. It's also zoned MU4. So it's a similar zone to what would be in the commercial corridor here. This zone doesn't have some of the protections that we would put into the neighborhood commercial zone. But in terms of basic building form, it's not completely kind of out of whack with what we're proposing for the CC1 zone.
Joel, Mary Rouse has a question, then I want to follow up on what you're just saying. Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, Joel, earlier I asked you about the RF zones and you skipped over them. Could you go back to that previous slide and talk about those RF zones and why they were introduced and not discussed in the small area plan? Why all of a sudden we see them in this map and nobody ever brought them to our attention in the community?
Well, that was part of our earlier conversations with the community and a thought that some of these properties, which are actually much larger properties that are partly zoned MU3A and partly zoned either R2 or R1B right now. We didn't want to extend that mixed use zoning out. And by the way, some of these properties actually were included in the small area plan boundaries because the properties themselves were included within the small area plan. But these portions of the properties didn't seem to make sense to move the mixed use zoning further into the neighborhood. These properties don't front onto Connecticut Avenue. And there was also some issues with the future land use map designation for these properties. So it was suggested that we propose for them instead, an RF zone, which actually allows, oddly enough, less height than either R1B or R2, but it does allow a 2-unit building rather than an R2 and R1B, which allow a 1-unit building. So all of the row house areas like Georgetown, like Capitol Hill, that's typically RF1 zoning, and that's the kind of building that would be allowed in those areas.
So let's try that one more time, because the current zoning on the west side of Connecticut Avenue clearly allows semi-detached structures, yes. And so what do you kept saying? There's under RF1, it could only be a single unit.
No. Our R2 allows a single family dwelling that is attached to another single family dwelling, like a duplex.
Got it.
RF1 actually allows 2 principal units within one building. So it's like a condoized kind of a thing. Like I said, it's really common in many parts of the city, including in parts of Ward 3. But that's what we're proposing. And again, it's to kind of serve as a bit of a transition between the R2, R1B areas and the CC1 and CC2 areas.
But Joel, may I interject that nobody asked you to do this? This is something the Office of Planning just came up on their own. They never introduced it to the community. They never talked about it. We don't have row houses in this community except on Jennifer Street on the east side. And if that's what you're talking about, I just think it's just inappropriate for OP to just simply drop this on us without any discussion, without any consideration, without any explanation. Yours is
well, it was discussed. It was discussed at previous meetings in front of the neighborhood, and it was discussed with the advisory group kind of at length. So, like, I mean, and I'm fine. Like, I mean, if Ms. Rouse, if the neighbor doesn't want this, then that's an appropriate comment for the zoning commission. We felt that it was an appropriate way of transitioning and using these partial sites in a way that made more sense than extending the mixed use zoning further into the neighborhood. But that, that's a good comment for the zoning commission if you think that's an inappropriate thing.
This is Robin. We're talking about.
Hold on 1 second. One second. Commissioner Sherman wanted to follow up on.
Okay.
Well, I guess he doesn't. All right.
Okay, I just related to this. I think my recollection of this in one of the initial drafts of the small area plan or in your initial discussions with the community, there was some talk of changing the zoning in the residential areas from single family. In fact, initially, I think there was something about that. And there was an outrage that you were including this and you were asked to take it out, and you did. But now it seems like you're kind of sneaking it back in, I think, by proposing it here. I mean, not the small area plan, but Peter, at first you were nodding, now you're frowning.
Well, I remember there certainly was outrage
I mean,
about
because the Office of Planning was, well, in the future, we want to talk about this. And they had included that in some document. And people are like, no, we don't want that. And then you all took it out. So this just seems to me to be kind of like, oh, here we are back again.
Well, nobody's trying to sneak anything in here. I'm here with a map in front of you. Again, if you think that this is inappropriate for some reason, I'm happy to take that back. This is the kind of feedback that I'm here for. I just don't know what you mean by I'm trying to sneak something in, you know?
You were asked to take it out before and you did.
I was never asked to take it out. I was asked to put it in.
By whom? By whom were you asked to put it in?
That was part of our conversations with the community and with the advisory group that we met with.
Well, this is literally in my backyard, and my husband and I have been part of all the meetings, starting with the small area plan. And it was never one of our requests or one of our understandings that this was up for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
And I have the notes from all the meetings to prove it.
This is Robin Mills. Don't you remember, anybody in this audience speaking goes to the mic. They can't hear you online. All right. So
Joel, just a quick follow-up then. On this slide and taking a look at the picture to the left, which I think you mentioned might be Capitol Hill. Is that correct?
Sorry, which
The
one?
picture on the left is meant to be
Yes.
Capitol Hill. So when my constituents ask me what this will look like, I could say, if you're standing at Eastern Market and looking across the street, is that kind of what the corridor would look like? That picture, I presume,
Well,
is
that's
taken.
That's not Eastern Market. That's
Okay.
a little bit further down.
Oh, okay, okay. So if
This is I'm pretty sure this is the Safeway site, which is on I want to say 14th and Potomac. So it's a bit further down from Eastern Market.
okay, but these are essentially,
I think the upshot here is that this is MU4 zoning.
got it.
The CC1 zone is based on MU4. It's
Right.
got some additional provisions like the 3-foot setback, you know, the step backs that don't exist, you know, in this portion of Capitol Hill, but it's generally what MU4 looks like.
Right. But this gets right to the heart of the notion of tempering the height that people have been opposed to by introducing design elements that can ameliorate that, can mitigate a feeling of a tall kind of wall of buildings that people are confronting. So I just come back to that because I'm very sensitive to the sentiment expressed many times in the community about height and understanding what you've proposed. This is 55 feet plus potentially 15 feet of a mechanical penthouse on top that would be recessed off the building. You don't even see it here. So it's essentially 55 feet, which, as we've discussed before, current zoning allows for a building as high as 55 feet. The Avalon is about 40 feet. So I'm just trying to give people who ask me, give me a sense of what this is going to look like, the scale of it. I could say, go take a look on Capitol Hill. Is that fair?
Yeah, in terms of scale, it's appropriate. And there's, you know, again, there's MU4 zoning kind of all over the city.
Right.
A lot of it, you know, has not been kind of built out like this one was, which is why I chose this site.
Right.
So a lot of MU4 zoning, just like the MU3 zoning here, the buildings aren't built out to what they could be,
Right.
even now.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know whether, you know, how, well, this is not a bad example.
Yeah, okay.
I think of the building form in terms of what the building would look like. The building would probably look very different from these. And
Sure.
that's why looking at pictures can be a little bit problematic because people think this is going to be built across from me, and it wouldn't be that.
Right.
But in terms of scale, I guess it would be something similar.
Right. So just so people understand as well, when we talk about an 80-foot building that could be built with the mechanical penthouse on top, at this structure, at this site, the Civic Core site, the Livingston is the closest building to us that is about 80 feet, right here at the corner of Livingston and Connecticut, the apartment building on the southeast side.
And is that to the top of the building or
It's
to the top of their penthouse?
I think it's to the top of the penthouse, but it's I think it's pretty much that. The structure is one, though, that's easy for people to visualize because they can look at it across the street from Starbucks and they can say, okay, that's an 80-foot building. And imagine transplanting it up here somewhere. It would be a very different design, obviously, a different thing altogether. But that's what people are trying to wrap their minds around.
Right, and can I add, this is Stuart Miles McLean. Bruce, to your point, you're asking about what would it look like from across the street, and you're comparing it to 14.
I'm sorry, who is talking, please?
Stuart Miles McLean,
Oh, all right.
39th Street, backing up to the CVS parking lot. And Bruce, I appreciate your point. What would it look like if you're looking across the street from it? But what you're talking about is looking across Pennsylvania Avenue, which is 6 lanes wide with a green median and a 3-box strip, and then sidewalks and a slight setback. What we're talking about for our house is a 15-foot alley between us and that parking lot. So if you build a 55-foot building in that parking lot behind my house, I can spit on it from my backyard. So it's a very, very different situation than looking at it across basically, you know, I don't know how wide Pennsylvania Avenue is with 6 lanes and a median strip, but it sure is a hell of a lot wider than the 15-foot alley behind my house. So you're talking about building in a parking lot that has to get permission to continue being a parking lot every few years, although they're trying to do an end run on that right now. It's very different. So those of us who live in the blocks on the west side behind the commercial strip, we are facing an incredibly different thing that's likely to destroy our property values, which is our biggest.
Stuart, just hold one second. I just want to ask Joel one question, because what immediately it would impact you is the RF zone. So do we have max heights on those?
Sorry, in the RF zone,
Yeah.
maximum height is 35 feet.
Okay, so just so we're clear about this, Stuart, it's not either 80 feet or whatever. What's the max for the non-Civic Core commercial zone?
50 feet with a 12 to 15-foot pindos.
Okay, it's neither of those things. It's something like 35 feet.
35 feet is the maximum height in RF1.
Okay, how tall is your house, Stuart?
Is RF1 what's being suggested right now for the CVS parking lot?
Yeah, if you look at the map, if you could go back to 9, yeah. I take it the CVS parking lot is the upper oblong on the west, upper rectangle on the west side of Connecticut, right?
I think so.
Yeah. You're
That
running
would be a little carve out for RF as opposed to all these other numbers and jargon you're using.
Well, but Stuart, what is, just out of curiosity, what is the height of your house?
I do not know.
Okay.
It's on a sloping lot, so as a point was made earlier,
The front
it-
facing is
it's-
different than the
yeah,
back.
the front is different than the back. So even if I could measure,
Okay. So we have a question here. Ron?
you know,
I just wanted to point out a couple things. I think Bruce, your questions are well taken, and everyone has a lot of concern about how buildings might look. But the approach here is sort of form-based code light. And what that is, I just want to clarify this a little bit, is that urban designers take the essential elements of what might make a good street or a good massing on a site and try and pull out those essential things, which this code has. I mean, we've sort of glossed over a little bit the provisions in the code that would prevent glass boxes from being built, that would prevent blank walls from being built. And those are new things. The traditional zoning doesn't do that. The existing zoning doesn't do that. So you can build blank walls, very unfriendly, unurban kinds of designs. But the new code does things to keep that from happening. It stops short of architecture because, as Joel says, it's very hard to do. And maybe it's not a good thing also, because, you know, to have some freedom of expression and to have some fresh ideas in the buildings maybe is a good thing. The other thing I was just going to point out, the caller, whoever that was, that under existing zoning, the full height, whatever it is, 55 feet, 40 feet, whatever it is, can be built essentially at the property line that abuts adjacent single-family homes. Under this zoning, in rear yards, that the back of new development that fronts on Connecticut Avenue has to be pulled back, it has to step up a certain way. It's much friendlier and much more of a transition than what's in place even now. So I think for what it's worth, and Joel, you're selling yourself short here in that this new code really does a lot to describe what can happen, and it does a lot to transition to neighborhoods and to make a good streetscape.
But I would say under the existing zoning, you can go up to 55, but right now, most of the buildings are 40, I believe, 45. I know, but the point is, I doubt many building owners would bother to tear down an existing building and build a new one just to get 10 feet in height. That's why it's now you're allowed to go up higher. So even though one says under existing zoning, it can go up to 55, the reality is that it's probably not ever going to happen. If the zoning stayed at 55, it simply wouldn't be worth it to someone to get 10 more feet.
And that's the point that you covered on Monday when you were on the Zoom call
Right.
about the height. That if you reduce the height, then you reduce the ability to accommodate the housing that the city is interested in. And therefore, it's going to make these projects, less feasible.
It depends on, there's reducing the height and then there's reducing the height. You can reduce the height to the point where, it's like we talked about on Monday, the zoning can become non-conforming to the comprehensive plan, which the existing zoning now is. It's not fully consistent with the existing, with the new planning policy for this area. So everybody's right, in this regard. There is, there is a point though where a reduction in height would be difficult for us to support under the planning and policy direction that we have from council. Excuse me?
Someone's waiting to get in.
Someone is waiting to get into the meeting. I don't see it on my screen. But perhaps you do, Peter. Joel, go ahead. I don't know.
So these are a couple of.
Sorry. These are a couple of illustrations of the Civic Core site under the CC2 zoning. This was much more difficult to do because the zoning simply would allow more flexibility for how a building could be or buildings could be placed on the property. But it does show a building of 65 feet tall. I'm sorry, but it does show the building at the front property line. And it does show kind of the relationship to some of the houses that exist to the rear of it. The image on the right is once again from the Chevy Chase small area plan. The image on the upper part was just an interesting one that I found kind of at the last minute. So I put it in. It's actually in Vancouver, which is a great city if you've never been. But it's an interesting example of residential above a non-residential use. In this case, it's actually above a fire station. And it's probably a little bit taller than what would be possible on the Civic site under the zoning we're proposing. But it's not particularly far out of the range because it's 4 levels of residential above that civic use at the bottom. And so I thought that was just kind of interesting.
Right. Any visualization is helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if it's helpful. Again, the building would not look anything like that again, and it's not intended to show what a building on this site would look like. It's intended to show what a possible height of that building would be.
Right.
And could I just return for a moment to a horse that has been flogged a million times, but OP's proposal for this site is 80-foot penthouse included.
No, not quite. It's 65 feet with a 12-foot habitable penthouse and an additional 3 feet for mechanical. So that would be 77 maximum.
That'd be, I think it's right goes to 80, Joel, I think.
Oh, does
it? Yeah, I think it does. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think you just said
That's all right.
65 feet plus a possible
Plus 12
15.
plus 3, yeah.
So
okay.
that's
It's
80.
65. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. It
That's,
is.
that's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Math major, sorry.
Yeah.
Not a math major.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the little 3, that's the hat on top of the habitable penthouse there,
Yes.
right? Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay.
All right.
I think Corinthia has a question. Corinthia.
Oh, no, I just wanted to comment that that I do like if this, you know, the update of the community center and library was a little closer to the street line. I do like the thought and idea of that as a member of this community. And I do appreciate the images that were put on the slides. You know, I like those 2 ideas as well. I know there's a lot of not liking, but I just want to voice that I do like some of the ideas you guys have proposed.
Okay.
So where do we stand? You finished, yes? Oh,
Next
one last-
steps.
Yeah, I just wanted to, sorry. I just wanted to come back to the slide once again, just to remind people of kind of what's coming up. And we've talked about this a fair amount, so I won't spend too much time on it. But the Zoning Commission public hearing is once again on April the 29th. You can submit comments to the record now if you want to. The record is open for comments, so you can certainly do that. And you can also, of course, come and testify on the night of, it's called testifying, but it's really just, you know, coming and talking to the Zoning Commission. You can come and attend that meeting. Their meetings, by the way, are virtual. So you would have to attend online. They don't have a hybrid situation like your ANC does.
Sort of.
No, I mean, it's
Or do we have a hybrid?
yeah. No, it's really interesting. Actually, you know, I attend the Zoning Commission twice a week. And so it's kind of interesting being in a meeting with actual people again.
Yeah.
But anyways, there is the public hearing that comes up. That will last as long as it takes. It can happen in one night. It can happen over the course of a number of nights. There are a couple of steps after that. The Zoning Commission at some point will take proposed action. That's notified. That notice is sent out. And then the final step in the process happens usually at least a couple of months after the public hearing, and that's called final action. And that's when the Zoning Commission actually votes on something, up or down, and then it's published, and then it becomes law. And that's kind of where we're at.
Ron, and if you're going to speak, pull that thing up. You're tall. Yeah, good.
Thank you. I haven't shrunk in my old age. I wanted to close my comments by agreeing with Michelle on one thing. I think that as much as I appreciate the benefit of holding the lot line on Connecticut Ave, I think we should just recognize that there's a major heritage tree there. It's going to stay. It's going to trump that provision. So why not rethink how we talk about the Connecticut Avenue frontage by recognizing the tree is there? Maybe the guidelines, maybe the zoning wants to anchor the southern part of the lot line at McKinley in Connecticut, but provide for something else. It really would be worth recognizing the reality of the tree.
Great. Yep.
So just 3 quick comments. Number one, with regard to Bruce's concerns about knowing what things are going to look like, Matter of Right does provide you with guidelines in which you have to operate. And your building permit, if it's not consistent with what the zoning requires, you will not get a building permit. With regard to the public space, that is a public process. The Public Space Committee will meet, and just like with all of our sidewalk cafes, that will be, the ANC will be able to weigh in, and the public. And that's really what people see, is what they experience in the public space. But there are concerns about the design guidelines. Peter had mentioned a number of them, wanting to be sure that nothing got developed like his favorite building at 5333 Connecticut Avenue. And that's why, if you see the zoning guidelines, they contain things like a limitation on the amount of glass you can have on the upper stories, and a requirement that at the lower level, you have storefront windows, unlike the blank wall that faces you when you're walking by the Safeway, or the blank wall that faces you, for the most part, when you go by the Civic Center. Excuse me. As somebody pointed out at the surplusing meeting, if you're a woman at night walking along that stretch of Connecticut, it's kind of scary, because it is dark, and you don't see anything going on in those buildings because they are set back and because they're blank walls. So I think provisions that require that buildings go to the building, to the lot line, and requirements that require that there be windows where there is retail on the lower level, those are all things that will make us feel safer and will contribute to the sense of vitality, excuse me, along Connecticut Avenue. With regard to an historic district, with all due respect, Mary, in many of the statements that are placed to make people, that are on the listserv, to make people less anxious about the historic district, it's often said that something like 97% of the cases that are work that goes on in the historic district are settled over the counter. So it can't really be both ways. It can't be that everything that happens in the historic district gives you the requirement that you have to discuss it with your neighbor, and then that 97% of what goes on just with the sign off over the counter. So I always find that very contradictory, and I think that that's not the way to get a seat at the table. Lastly, with regard to the contested case, there have been many submissions, or there are submissions to the Zoning Commission that will be reviewed by the council for the Zoning Commission as to whether or not the requirements for a contested case have been met. It's not something Joel can address. It's not a planning issue. It's what makes a contested case is defined in the regs, and the decisions will be made with a recommendation from the lawyers in that respect. But not being a contested case does not mean at all, as Joel was saying, that there won't be the opportunity, whether you're Robert Gordon or anybody else, to submit as much written testimony as you want, to go before the Zoning Commission and provide oral testimony, and to submit after the testimony is heard, answering any questions from the Zoning Commission. It's a very public process. There are all kinds of opportunities to participate. And for that reason, I think I urge all of us to go on in April to the Zoning Commission and make our concerns met. But I think that I thank you, Joel, for doing the best you could to provide some images to show us, because I think it's very hard for lay people to be able to go between what's written on a piece of paper in just words describing how we're trying to protect the character of Connecticut Avenue versus seeing what it would actually look like. But I would remind everybody that this notion of we should not only think of the west side of Connecticut Avenue. These regulations could make a big difference in the east side of Connecticut Avenue, in how it actually feels. Instead of a suburban style Safeway and blank walls or strip mall type developments, when those buildings redevelop, they will redevelop in a way that will have the same kind of character as we all love on the west side of the street. Thanks.
I think we should go to Ed Hanlon next and then to Mary Rouse. I thought Andrea had her hand up. In any case, I just want to put people on notice. It's 8:18 and I want to stop at 8:25 to just make a couple remarks about meetings. So Ed Hanlon.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? All right.
Yep.
Good. I did want to make a comment. There has been, as you know, I represent Chevy Chase Voice and I am their attorney. And there have been some comments tonight about contested hearings versus rulemaking hearings. I think it's very important for the public to understand the difference. First, a map amendment proposed by a property owner for one or more contiguous lots is a contested case under Chapter 2 of Subtitle Z of the zoning regs. And this is exactly what we have here. But why does it matter? It matters because in a rulemaking hearing, everyone gets 3 minutes. They can say whatever they want for 3 minutes. There's no right to cross-examination, no right to put on evidence, no right to call witnesses, no right to rebuttal evidence, no right to have the commission make findings of fact and conclusions of law. And most importantly, in a rulemaking hearing, there is no right to appeal the decision of the zoning commission. So a rulemaking hearing and a contested hearing are fundamentally different. In a rulemaking hearing, you have all the rights given by the Administrative Procedures Act. I'm sorry, in a contested hearing, you have all the rights given by the Administrative Procedures Act. In a rulemaking hearing, you have no rights. That zoning commission can listen to you until 11 o'clock at night, one after another, every 3 minutes, and then make a decision then and there, and never have to put in writing its findings of fact or its conclusions. And you have no right to appeal that decision because it's a legislative act. Rulemaking is legislative. A contested hearing is adjudicatory. And so it's fundamentally different. And I think everyone listening should understand those differences and why they're important. Did you have any questions for me about this point? Because I think it's really an important point.
Let me ask a very simple one. So on the narrow issue of whether members of the public can testify at the zoning commission hearing, whether it is rulemaking or contested, the answer is yes, they can. Is that right?
They cannot be cross-examined. So you can say whatever you want for your 3 minutes and only 3 minutes. And no one has the right to cross-examine you except the commission can ask you questions. No member of the public, there are no parties.
I understand.
And therefore, you can say what you want. I cannot put on any rebuttal. I cannot cross-examine, and I cannot appeal.
And I understand why you would want to do all those things, but what ordinary human beings think of testimony is not that they get to cross-examine people or contest. It is that they get to testify. So on the ability to speak, the answer is the public can speak, yes?
Each member of the public can speak for 3 minutes. You're not a party to the case, so you don't have the right to continue speaking. Okay. A party to the case can put on its case, and that case may last several hours or more, and can call witnesses. You can speak for 3 minutes. 1 minute of which is saying your name and your address and who you are.
Commissioner Gosselin.
Yeah, go ahead.
And Commissioner Sherman, since you are my single member representative, I just want to say from my perspective, this is a hotly contested question, and that should be a contested hearing in every respect. So that I hope, Ed, I hope that you are going to be successful in making it a contested hearing.
Thank you very much. Chevy Chase Voice intends to do just that.
Ed, my characterization of what testimony is and isn't seems to have prompted several people. So Liz Nagy is now going to speak in
30 seconds, Liz Nagy, 30 seconds. I think the point isn't just that the community thinks this is contested. The point is that legally this site has to be done in a zoning hearing that's a contested hearing, which is different from everybody has his opinion. And the other thing is, just because you can talk for 3 minutes doesn't mean that you're giving meaningful testimony. And that's one of the differences between a contested hearing and just a regular zoning hearing. I have a separate question, if I could. Will you be sending out these slides, or will they be on the website? Because it'd be great to have them. You have them all?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning.
Sorry, I missed it.
I was hoping that I would have these up on our website today. We had some typical technical issues. So we'll be getting this up onto this presentation as well as some other stuff up onto our website, hopefully within the next day or two.
Okay, so it'll be on the zoning website.
No, the Office of Planning website.
I'm sorry, Office of
Yes.
Planning, excuse me. And then the second question is, does anybody have an integrated timeline that they can put forward? So this is the zoning, this is next steps, but it doesn't include the RFP and DEMPED's timeline. Is there an integrated timeline that the community could have access to show, for example, we know that, we know that April is like the cruelest month, to quote Chaucer, because many terrible things are happening in August, but that's not reflected on.
Yeah, no,
on
that's a
your
good
slide.
question. I can contact DEMPED and see if
Can we
that can
see
be
if we
done.
can get an integrated timeline so that everybody can know when drop dead dates are and when important things are happening
Understand.
one
Yep.
after the other? Thank you.
No,
Thanks.
so I think Mary Rouse is waiting to speak, and then I want to say something about meetings. So I think we need to cut it short there. Mary, you're up.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I just wanted to say, since Ellen McCarthy brought up the issue of the historic district, let me just clarify that when the figure of 95 to 98% of permits are handled in a few business days, that refers to all the permits, 5,500 in 1 year, that we shared in a chart, and we can share again back to 2015. That shows a very regular, consistent practice in downtown that permits are reviewed and quickly approved for 95 to 98% of permit requests in the community. The remaining 2 to 5% are complicated, controversial, and other kinds of cases that are generally heard before the board, the Historic Preservation Review Board. That in no way should be confused with the argument that in a historic district, residents generally tend to have fewer neighbor versus neighbor conflicts, because if somebody is proposing a complicated or controversial or very unusual addition to their property, that they first run those plans by the Historic Preservation Office, who can help to review them and help perhaps mitigate some conflicts that may or may not be possible between neighbors. That's a very separate issue and separate argument. Thank you.
So with that, I think we end tonight's discussion of zoning. I remind you that we will have another special meeting on this subject on April 11th and a third on April 17th, in hopes of having a resolution about this prior to the April 29th zoning commission hearing. Now, I just want to change the subject slightly and just let you know that we have a lot of big issues before us. We've worked very hard right through December, and we've kind of stumbled into this year, among other things, with technology. But I want to let you know that commissioners seem to be running out of steam, and tonight's attendance by this commission is evidence of that. One commissioner said, I haven't bathed my children and had dinner with them in a long time, and I'm going to do that. Another said, it's Holy Week, and I'm going to do that. Several commissioners are saying we ought to go right back to just virtual meetings. Now, again, I think commissioners are politicians, even though we're really, really local politicians. We're all volunteers, and I really sympathize with my fellow commissioners' concerns about this, but they need to hear from you if you believe that we should keep in-person meetings, and if you believe we need to have special meetings on big issues like zoning changes, the RFPs, historic district, maybe bike lanes, Who knows where they are on bioretention basins, but if they don't change their design, we might have problems with that too. I just need, I think the community needs to say whether they think it's okay to go back to virtual meetings and maybe fewer meetings, or whether they want in-person meetings. So with that, I think we can wrap it for the night. I'd ask you to fold up your chairs and put them in the rack while we take down this technology. Thank you. And finally, apologies again. We're doing the best we can as volunteers with this technology. Bruce has gotten a job description out and an ask, and we're working on that. So thank you. Good night.
And thanks, Joel.